Welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning wherever you are. I'm your host, Dave Nava. I'm a solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Tonight, I'm ably assisted by Geraldine Hall, also a military trailblazer and a fellow colleague and friend at Salesforce. Each week, we invite a co-host, or sometimes in this case, co-hosts, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is the second and final episode in our Focus on Product series, exploring the power of Education Cloud. So, if you are interested in the education and higher learning industry and how Salesforce delivers focused solutions to power this fascinating space, this is the session for you. I would like to briefly introduce our co-host panel for tonight's session, Dan Neubert and Keely Battle. Both of our guests are longtime veterans of the Salesforce ecosystem and certified Education Cloud consultants. Dan is a senior manager of solution engineering at Salesforce with a diverse background in technology, education, and consulting. Keely is a manager of solution engineering at Salesforce with extensive experience in the education industry. It is great to have you hosting Office Hours with me. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. It would be awesome if you could each take a moment to introduce yourselves a little bit further and share your Salesforce stories. So Dan, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. So before getting to Salesforce, I was a solution engineer at a few different companies, as Dave mentioned, with a consulting background before that. So actually started out my career as an instructor, which was great for kind of later in my career as a solution engineer, presenting in front of folks, but consulting work also really helpful in getting me to the solution engineering role. If some of you have done consulting work, you can kind of sometimes it's challenging to be billing hours for too long. So I moved over to solution engineering and got over to Salesforce about 9 years ago. And I work on a team of strategic specialists. And Dave mentioned Education Cloud earlier, so they focus on our four major use cases for Education Cloud, which are, think of the student life cycle, so recruiting and admission, student success and advancement, and now getting into the student information systems. And as we get into this conversation, I'm happy to talk more about that. But again, thanks for having us, and Keely, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Hi, all. Keely Battle, manager of solution engineering. And, I had a colleague call me in 2015 and say, hey, we're doing something really cool over here at Salesforce. We had worked together, I'll talk about kind of my path, but we had worked together at Blackboard, which is a learning management system company, worked in education. And he said, we're doing something where we're putting the learner at the center of everything so that they can really be served by the institutions that are there to provide their education. So, and at the time I said, oh, I just started this other job. So my path to Salesforce had a false start, but I started in Salesforce in 2018 as a solution engineer, having held that role at several different organizations prior to that, specifically in education. But I did start my career, like Dan, in consulting and kind of business analysis, change management. So I think, we'll talk about this kind of the progression of those skills and being able to ask the right questions and stay curious kind of served me all the way through that. And I stayed curious about Salesforce and used Trailhead to learn it. I didn't know it, and then kind of joined up in the solution engineering team back in 2018, and have served on the education team since then.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of the things that I like best about this ecosystem is everyone has a different path here. There's no like traditional path. It's all varied. And we are going to get into the hard skills, right? What makes up Education Cloud, all the different functionalities, as well as the soft skills, right, for interacting with customers. But before we do that, I do want to cover some admin items. If you are joining for the first time, I always like to explain the purpose of these office hours for context, right? So these sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with both military trailblazers and allies. Absolutely everyone is welcome to attend each and every session to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics so that we can collectively help you achieve your professional development and your career-related goals. For this next hour, this is an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. So everyone on the call is absolutely encouraged to step up and both ask and answer questions from your perspective, which of course will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Do keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. Geraldine's going to be posting some great information there, things like learning, networking, employment opportunities, little tidbits. And of course, this is your session. So if you'd like to ask a question at any point during today's session, feel free to do so. A couple ways to do that. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can post your questions in chat. And if you'd like, you can raise your hand and I will do my best to monitor the chat window as well as looking for those raised hands, and we'll answer questions in the order received. Finally, tonight's session is being recorded. If you would like to share an attribution-free comment, let me know beforehand, and I will make sure that our expert editor will pull it out of the final recording. All right. So we got a little bit into path in the explanation of kind of the Salesforce journey for both Dan and Keely, but I want to drill into it a little bit more and ask this question, right? So were you always drawn to working specifically within the education industry? And Keely mentioned maybe not. And did you find your way here by chance? And I think kind of providing more clarity on the details surrounding your path, because as we mentioned, right, paths into the ecosystem can be very circuitous, will help folks understand if this ecosystem or specifically this industry might be a good fit for them. So could you dive in a bit more into your journey and why education?
Keely, you go first this time.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So great question, and I love this because it is all different paths, right? So I actually started out of college. I got an English degree, so all these different paths. And I wasn't ready to teach. I wasn't ready to kind of write. I wasn't really planning anything with this degree. So I landed at a company that did technical implementations for healthcare and hospitality, right? So I didn't start out in education. There are a lot of different possible paths, but it happened. It was a job, right? And they were going to train me. So those were the two criteria that I found that started me on this path. And it was a big benefit. It was a small company. I learned a lot. I wore a lot of hats. At that time, it was like 2006. So it was kind of early 2000s. And then, so I was able to see a lot of the different ways that people approach technology in different roles that were in tech, just in that kind of small microcosm of a company. And then I got an outreach from an education company that was looking for RFP writers, if you can believe it. So, and I said, oh, RFPs, you can do that just for a job? And that's just one thing I was doing. So kind of looking at the things that you're doing today and saying, is this something that could actually be a full job? And with that outreach, I moved into working for an education technology company and writing about the services that they provided. So it's still not a technical role, but that was a capability to literally parse through all of their documentation, help write and help craft messages around what they were doing, and make connections within the company to the different teams. So the solution engineering manager reached out and said, stop writing, start talking. So I had a lot of folks that kind of helped me along that path to say, these are the opportunities. Obviously, I didn't know that role existed of solution engineering. What does that mean, right? And then fell in love with the education industry, got my master's in ed actually a little bit while later while working. So a virtual online degree, and then just followed that path to the different companies that kind of supported the mission of education, right? So I became very passionate about the evolution of learning, the ways that people access it, and the rest is history to get to Salesforce.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't know what solution engineering was either until after I'd interviewed and had gotten the role. I'm like, all right, I better figure this out.
What am I going to do? Yeah.
Dan, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So great to learn a little bit more, Keely, about, I knew some of that, not all of it. So I would start by just saying, and this has helped me now in my role as a solution engineer. My first job was really in sales, selling technology, and I had a marketing degree, a business degree coming out of college. So, but an English degree and a marketing degree, you definitely don't need a computer science degree to have quote unquote a technical role at Salesforce. I quickly realized I didn't like sales, but I did like explaining technology to folks, and literally probably, I don't even know if it was Google at that time, started searching for jobs and found a job as an instructor for a company called Blackbaud. So there's a black board here and a black bod. And what they do mainly is fundraising software. So for those of us that have gone to college, university, the folks that are raising money from you, that is they're using some of that technology. And what was great about that, not knowing it, is that when I got to Salesforce, I had experience in that part of the industry, in the advancement side of higher education. And I was just kind of lucky enough that not really a lot of folks on my team did. So that really led to specialization and growth in that area here at Salesforce. So I mentioned all that just you never know how these things are going to build upon each other. Also, as an instructor, I was presenting maybe 25, 30 hours a week in a classroom setting, which is much different than giving a demonstration in a sales setting, but it's definitely gave me a comfort level in those settings. And, you're talking to someone who would drop courses in college that had presentations. So it definitely helped me along the way there. So, I would just say one thing that's taught me is where you can see something where you can have an impact on an organization. I thought specializing here at Salesforce would help in the education space, and mentioned it enough to my management for them to give me a chance. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I love that. It's proof that even if you don't think you're good at something, if you do it enough, eventually you'll become good at it. I never would have thought I'd be a great presenter either, but having given so many different customer demonstrations, I think I've got the knack of it. So
exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, that was helpful from a kind of a past perspective to learn, what brought you into it. Now I want to unpack a little bit about what keeps you here, right? So what do you find most fulfilling about working on projects and helping to bring about demonstrations or technical solutions within a niche industry like education? So long way of saying, once you arrived, why'd you stay?
I guess, Keely, I'll go first on this one. I think if you're a solution engineer, you have just an innate love of technology and curiosity. I think Keely said that earlier. I had worked for two other technology companies before coming to Salesforce, and just when I got here, it was kind of mind blown as far as how fast we are moving, and how we continue to do that. That was 9 years ago, like I mentioned earlier. So initially, as an individual contributor, when I was a solution engineer, I'm here in the Southeast. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. I love the technology. I love the people that Salesforce was hiring and that I was working with, like Keely. And luckily, I just happened to love the industry that I fell into by accident, getting to work with, large universities here in the Southeast, University of Florida, and others. So that was really great for me. And then now, leading a small team, getting to hire folks and see them grow is vastly more rewarding than I've ever done as an individual contributor. And just have loved that part of it as well, and try to help them overcome challenges and bring my expertise to that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll say, technology is a big part of it, right? To be able to see the application of this amazing, globally adopted, commercial grade, right, technology applied to a lot of the common experiences we've had, each of us, in an education setting, right? So for me, it's always been the mission of education. If I believe that every day I'm doing something that truly could change the way that someone else lives their life, right, is accessing information or is guided along the path. So to fall into education and then remain in it, it's really about that mission. And it's depending on the industry, you may not be as passionate, right? But if you can find that thing that says, okay, I truly believe that the things that I'm doing every day impact something. To me, that's been a big part of it, and kind of having that North Star personally. And honestly, the education industry, I've worked, adjunct to some enterprise and commercials, and it's so collaborative, right? They do compete, right, for students, especially now that there's an enrollment cliff coming or already here, where the population of students that could possibly be going into universities and even K-12 is diminishing. But they still collaborate, and it's for the benefit, right? There's academic research, there's student advising and student success groups. So the people that show up to have these conversations and to solve the problems are also a big part of why I stay, right? At these universities that are putting in the work, again, in service of that mission.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Passion is key. And that's one of the things that in my kind of brief experience with both nonprofit and Education Cloud as a volunteer, that I noticed that on the customer side, it was a collaborative environment to be able to figure out how Salesforce could better help those institutions. And, folks were talking back and forth to evolve the current state of Salesforce functionality to better serve broader education and nonprofit industry. So it was just really, it was great to see that. So I appreciate hearing that. I want to dig into now a little bit more, not necessarily like into the weeds of specific products or functionality within Education Cloud, but kind of surface level, and talk about why each of you feels the Salesforce platform, and specifically Education Cloud, is uniquely suited to serve the complex needs of an industry like education, right? So what makes Salesforce good for education?
Yeah, I could kick that off, Dan, because I mentioned earlier, a former colleague had called me and said, hey, this is what we've been thinking about and trying to do in education. At the time, I was working for a learning management system company, right? If you're familiar with Blackboard. So very course-based, focused on kind of that structure and a learning path, which is obviously very important, especially with COVID, right? We see this academic continuity conversation, being able to continue to access resources. But what was missing at the time, and what excited me about Salesforce, and now the investment that Salesforce has made in making Education Cloud into an industry cloud, is that ability to focus and center on the constituent, which in the accounts that I serve is the student, it's the family, right? So my team covers K through 12. So it's their families, it's the folks that are not just getting services from the school, but also from the services that wrap around that student for them to succeed and move forward. So I think the technology, to me, still remains unique in the fact that we can have that focus on that individual and connect all of the services and communications around them. Everything that we do related to kind of the sales and the service. So if you're more familiar with Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, right? Those underpin Education Cloud. So all of those features, functions that you can use to kind of move someone along a sales path, right? To get them into your system are also ones that we can use to guide students and families along a path to get them, matriculated or graduated or into the next step in their university career. So I think that's a very unique position that we're in at Salesforce, and what excites me about kind of the Education Cloud, industry cloud as well.
Awesome. Yeah.
I would just add that, as you can imagine, we're competing with a lot of bespoke solutions that are going after particular areas of a university, and that just creates a lot of silos of data. And what technology companies better to unlock those silos, and really at the end of the day create a better student experience. I mean, in our engagement with universities, we talk a lot about what they're experiencing outside of the institution, right? Whether it be Netflix or their iPhone or whatever it may be. We want to bring that modern experience to the campus as well, either on campus or virtually. And like Keely was saying, the underpinning of this is the Salesforce platform. So now, we're able to start to talk to them about things like agents. And because schools are investing in Salesforce, that's what comes along with that investment. So, I think that's a really unique position where we're unlocking data for institutions and improving the student experience outside the classroom.
Yeah, having been a student recently and gone through kind of the higher education learning path, it's interesting the number of different solutions that I was using at my educational institution, and it would have been nice to have had one with a unified interface that behind the scenes was reaching out to those disparate systems and coordinating information and presenting it to me in an intelligible manner, but not the case. So it's good to know that we're making breakthroughs for some organizations and institutions that are able to leverage Salesforce. I guess to get us all on the same page, Dan, Keely, could you talk briefly about what Education Cloud is, right? You'd mentioned student information system and some of the other core pillars. If you could break that down just at a wave top level to provide everyone with context, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can start, and I'll try not to make this too much of a history lesson, but folks have been, institutions, universities, colleges have been using Salesforce for a long time. And they were doing lots of cool things to support students using, say, Sales Cloud as an example, going back to 2011, 2013. And it was great, but they were doing it in their own unique ways. And what I mean by that is building out data models and building out business rules that were specific to their institution and kind of going off on their own path. So over time, institutions were kind of, there wasn't a templated way to approach leveraging Salesforce at a higher education institution. So in 2016, we actually came out with our higher ed data architecture that we later rebranded our education data architecture, which, to not get too in the weeds here, was a managed package that was on top of Salesforce as a CRM. And this gave institutions just a data model to get started and a common framework for universities and partners, our SI partners, to work from, which was successful. We built some additional managed packages on top of that. But then since then, we have moved to Education Cloud, which, again, not to get too far in the weeds, is a completely different way to develop technology for Salesforce, not as a managed package, but as a true industry cloud alongside other industry clouds, right on the core platform. And what that allows us to do is leverage the work that's being done by other industry clouds when applicable. So, for example, if our friends at Health and Life Sciences are creating something like care plans that they're going to use to help manage their patients, can our product managers try to think about how they can adopt that for the education space, which was not something we were able to do in a land of a managed package, and has really even accelerated even faster the last couple of years how we've been able to develop on the platform, and allowing for either greater adoption of the different technology that Salesforce can bring to the industry.
Awesome, that's really helpful. Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Anything to add, Keely?
I don't know that I would. I think you couldn't have said it better.
Awesome. So I want to, while we're on kind of the technical topic, I wanted to dive into a little bit about the Education Cloud data model. And obviously, it's designed to support the entire learner experience. From your practical experience, whether it's consulting or whether it's solution engineering, how do you see institutions adapting to this data model in practice? Do they have any challenges? If so, what are the challenges that they face?
Keely, you got the hard one.
I got the pass now. And I think Dan mentioned, right? So people have been doing, building education use cases on Sales Cloud since, 2010, 2011 at the very least. And then we had a managed package approach before we were able to build directly on core, right? So I think one of the I don't want to say challenges, but maybe opportunities, is that the people that built those processes and made those decisions may not be at the institution anymore, first of all, right? So there's some folks that are just there, they're there for 30 years, they remember everything, right? There's this institutional knowledge, and then there's people that build it, didn't comment their, when I say comment your code, didn't document their decision, right? So they're working with some of that tech. And I think, we talked about a little bit of technical debt in terms of like, why did we make that decision? Did that decision that we made and built in 2012, does it still apply today in this environment? So I think there's kind of that challenge of, are we trying to pick up everything that was in our old house and move it to the new house? and the living room is shaped differently, and we have 3 bedrooms now instead of 2. So there's that thought process. I think that has to happen when they start to look at the new data model. For folks that are net new, it's probably more a consideration of how do we want to represent our business processes, and what can we do natively, and what can we kind of take advantage of that's already there. And I think the flexibility, there's a lot of it, but the term-based approach, not everyone is traditional spring, summer, fall, right? And the ability to kind of represent those different terms for someone who might be running constant enrollment, right? So that is supported through this data model. It's very flexible, but you have to really know your business and kind of how you want to represent it as you learn the data model and then apply your own business processes to it. So that's what I would say. I would say probably for a long-term Salesforce user, it's that kind of, where is this an opportunity to revisit what we've done and understand why we made the decisions. And for a net new, it's more, can we work to represent our business in the data model, which that supports so much. Dan, I'll let you.
Yeah, I would just add to that, beyond the data model, and I was talking about how we're kind of leveraging tooling from other industries, there's a lot that comes with these industry clouds. Things like, of course, automation tools like Flows, but Omni Studio and other things. And in our industry, it's a lot of the times, especially with smaller institutions, it's an accidental admin that is running some of these orgs, which we're really asking that admin now to skill up to very much not an accidental admin with a lot of skills. So if there's a enablement challenge that is coming with the, just having a more robust Salesforce orgs that are able to do more than previously we were kind of delivering in more of a walled off managed package.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. And it seems, it's fairly common across all industries where you have folks that have implemented solutions and then disappeared, and then you're trying to put the pieces back together and figure out what's going on, and then those accidental admins come in and save the day. And on that note, I wanted to talk a little bit about technical debt, right? And how have you seen specifically Salesforce help institutions minimize their technical debt? Because oftentimes in my industry, what I see is there's a lot of point solutions, right? They do one thing really great, but at some point the contract runs out, or it breaks, or they don't have money to support, the continuing development and fixing of that code base, and they find themselves with a bunch of point solutions that don't talk to each other, and they don't have an integrated way to get at their data. So how have you seen Salesforce kind of solve that problem for educational institutions?
Depending on the institution, slowly and organically. I think still a lot of the time institutions are coming to us with point solution needs. It's not, we don't have, not every organization has a visionary in some C-level position that says, they just came from some outside of higher ed position, and they see the value of this enterprise wall-to-wall CRM. There, maybe it's a leader in a particular division that's looking to solve, recruiting for this business school. And then what happens over time is the growth and confidence and skills internally that come with Salesforce. And then they kind of organically realize, oh, why do I have this case management solution? Or why do I have this other collaboration tool internally? I can do this on Salesforce. The other thing I would add a lot, especially when I first started here, these larger institutions can act like mini cities, right? And they have tons of CRM solutions and also marketing automation solutions. So I know we're kind of focused on Education Cloud, but and the CRM side, but the Marketing Cloud and marketing automation can be a driver too in a lot of these solving problems for institutions, and kind of centralizing those marketing efforts and then pushing down different business units to the different divisions. And really what's great about that is that it improves the student's experience or the constituent's experience, right? Because now they're maybe receiving more personalized and less communication.
Yeah, that's interesting. Keely, I wanted to get your thoughts, and then I had a follow-up question.
Yeah, I'll just really quick, just to underline kind of that role, right? Dan made the point of the university kind of being a city in itself and often can be decentralized in decision making, right? They're very collaborative, but also can be very committee based. And, we've talked to them all the way from like their postal services to their sponsored research, right? So sometimes it is us and our account teams that are, crossing the campus, introducing people to each other, to encourage kind of that center of excellence capacity, which doesn't always materialize, but it is something that we always try to talk about and bring into the minds of folks of, how are you all talking about this? This might be the first time you're talking about your CRM processes. So that's not unique to education either, but it is, again, in terms of transferable skills, it's definitely one that shows up in solution engineering too.
I wanted to hit on what you just mentioned, center of excellence. So for folks that may not be familiar with the term, because it's one of those concepts that I have that conversation with customers all the time who, as a solution engineer, they're potentially going to purchase Salesforce and they want to know, hey, what happens after the partners have finished their work and now we have to maintain this, and whether or not we have a managed services agreement. I tell them, hey, you need to have a center of excellence. What does that look like from both of your perspectives in education? Like, who creates that? What's it formed of from a stakeholder perspective? And what is it?
Yeah, I can start, Dan, if you want.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And the answer is really, it depends, right? Because it depends on where Salesforce has started with them. Sometimes there's a centralized IT that kind of owns Salesforce as a technology and provides it as a service to its business users. So, and sometimes it's within a single department. They have their own IT, right? They kind of work together. So it takes a lot of different shapes. There are some universities that have started to hire into titles like Chief Digital Officer, CDO, CTO. And like you said, that's kind of the ideal, right? Someone is like guiding the ship, but more often it's people that have kind of volunteered, raised their hand, and have an investment in not only the technology but the business processes and the metrics maybe that surround it. So if they're responsible for increased enrollment and decreased summer melt, where the students don't come back after they've been admitted, it'll depend on who has skin in the game for the success. Dan, I'll let you.
Yeah, I would just add, Dave and folks, like as far as what it looks like, where I've seen it done well, thinking of a small private college in the Miami area, it's got a top-down approach where there's really, again, leadership has said this is how we want to approach this. And then the actual center of excellence, of course, being a mix of IT and the business. And then having an approach just to get to a tangible example, they have a couple of Salesforce orgs, right? They have an intake process for projects that might be Salesforce or some other technology, but they try to lean into Salesforce as much as possible and use that center of excellence to understand, okay, where do we want this to go? Who can support this? Or is this not a Salesforce project at all? So I think, again, like it's something we say a lot and it's very hard for an institution to do because they're so decentralized. So they need that executive leadership, but then kind of tactically, right, both business and IT trying to solve problems, as much as they can across an institution.
Yeah, no, that's helpful in clarifying the term. Thank you. I wanted to pivot a little bit. We had talked about technical debt and the necessity to bring together these disparate sources of information for that unified, aggregated data view. And thankfully, right, we have Data Cloud now. And a few weeks ago, AgentForce came out. Can you and to be 100% truthful, I don't know to what extent Data Cloud and AgentForce have integrated with Education Cloud. So if you have any information on that, would love to get your take. And if it hasn't yet, maybe some future applications and where you're hoping it will.
So I started in 2015, and we have been talking about connected campus and connected student for a long time, and integrating data for a long time. And I feel like with Data Cloud, we're finally getting to a place where we can talk about the 360-degree view of a record and kind of consuming all of that information. So I'm really excited about it. I think, to getting back to kind of a previous comment, if we truly want to be able to serve these students well and have an effective implementation of Salesforce, the schools that are doing it best are doing it with probably now robust integration, and hopefully we can make that a lot easier with Data Cloud. And there's nothing about the data model, an industry data model like Education Cloud, stopping someone from using Data Cloud. And I think our industry maybe can benefit just as much as any other industry with how decentralized they are. As you know, and that is going to be the fuel that is the fire of AgentForce. And we're Salesforce employees are just getting ramped up on AgentForce. I find it super exciting, and again, a place where we can both internally with higher education employees and the students they're serving, infuse agents to help them serve their students better. So in short, saying, we've been talking about this centralized data for a long time, and I think we're really now delivering on the technology that can do it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Keely, anything to add?
No, I think the vision that Dan outlined is, an exciting one, and kind of the jumping off point for a lot of conversations too. What do you want your data to do for you, right? It's a new kind of question to be asking on a campus, but it's an exciting conversation to have.
Yeah, as someone who is at this moment helping my son enroll in community college, I wish that I had an agent that would take away some of the pain, especially with the FAFSA, but that's a separate topic, right?
You can let us know the account later, Dave.
Yeah.
We'll talk
I'm
to
going
them.
to build that, right, as a demo and deliver it to the community college, get them to buy Salesforce. I see, Iris, you have your hand raised. Question or comment?
I love everything that you said there, David. It is especially painful navigating the college application course and everything. My question was, I just went to Life Sciences Dream-In last week, and it was very, very exciting just seeing all of these companies related to life sciences. And then there was some Salesforce leaders in the life sciences as well. They had an incredible panel. Do you see anything like that's happening for education? Because there's so many different levels of education, from kindergarten to private to, like community college to Harvard and all of those things. Do you see a way of them somehow bringing it together and like just bringing a little bit of that magic of working together? Because that's what Salesforce really is, an opportunity to work together for the better good of everybody and making some money as well, of course.
Keely, go ahead. You want to talk about Higher Ed Summit a little bit?
Education Summit, not just higher ed. Yeah, I know. Because Iris, that's exactly right. So we have for a number of years, I don't even know how many, had an event called Education Summit. It's held in this upcoming March. It's in Chicago, but it's similar to what you just described, right? So it's the ability for a lot of our customers, people who aren't customers and want to talk about the role of Salesforce technology in education, to come and tell their stories, right? So really the goal is to have the schools tell those stories for our product teams and our industry cloud representatives, kind of hearing those and then sharing kind of our insights. We have industry advisors that do some research and share that back. So what you're describing is exactly the goal of that summit, and it is an annual event and has continued. So happy to share. I'll share a link in here for folks to learn more about the next one. Dan, anything you want to add there?
Something that's just top of mind, Iris, we do also attend some industry events, and a big one in the education space is called EDUCAUSE. It's next week in San Antonio, Texas. I'm excited to visit the Alamo. I've never done that. And just to kind of give you a sense of what that, if this is helpful, at the booth for Salesforce at EDUCAUSE, of course, we'll do demos of Education Cloud, but we're also going to have a whiteboard there where we can go through what we're calling data discovery for Data Cloud. So just helping institutions understand where their data lives and whiteboarding that experience out. And we're also going to have folks actually building AgentForce agents in the booth and being able to walk away with those agents. So I'm excited to go and get in front of customers. It always kind of makes me feel more excited about my role. So just wanted to mention that we also focus on some industry events as well.
Very cool. Thank you, Alexa, and good question, Iris. Alexa, I saw, oh, there we go. There's the question I was going to ask you about. So Alexa asks, are educators asking for any features that are currently unavailable in Salesforce? Anything we can't do yet? Great question. I love that.
Yes, is the answer.
There will always be something someone wants to do, and it's not out of the box yet. Alexa, I'd love to hear more. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but I'd love to hear more, because you, as an educator, kind of what are some of the things that needs that you feel are met?
Oh no, I wish I were an educator. I'm not. I just was curious. I'm always interested in. Salesforce does so much for so many, but there's always one or two features that I feel like people in certain industries are like, oh, this is great, but if it only did this, then my life would be even more. Or I love your system, but why can't it do this one thing? So I was wondering if you heard common feature requests that we can't do yet.
I'm getting so what I would say, a great question, Alexa, getting back to there's a lot of point solutions in the higher education space, right? So they might not have this enterprise approach that we have, but maybe the thing they've been doing a long time, and they do it really well. So that is a challenge for us. So think about just to give some examples, there's in the recruiting and admissions space, when you're applying for an application, or excuse me, when you're filling out an application, applying to an institution, there's a number of technology companies that do that and have been doing it for a long time in a very robust way. So we do that as well. It just maybe there's certain features, like you're saying, that aren't there, and that they're used to experiencing, right? So that's where we really need that overarching vision of enterprise CRM to kind of help us there. And then from my background in fundraising, if you don't know anything about processing a donation that you have made to either a nonprofit or a higher education institution or a K-12 private school, there's a lot that goes into that. And those people are very specific about those donations and how it feeds into their accounting systems. So, and there are very mature solutions that do that. So just kind of an overarching answer of, we definitely have that, and it comes from the nature of competing with these mature pointed solutions.
Yeah, more niche players that have been in your industry. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Awesome, folks. Appreciate the questions. At this point, right, this is the time where we typically will do a group photo, and we share that on social media with our LinkedIn family. If you'd like to participate, go ahead and unmute your video. And if you don't want to, no worries. I definitely have had pretty much every day is a bad hair day, but there's days I don't want to be on camera either. So I'll give you a second to do that and get my capture tool ready. And I'll give you a count of 3 before I take the picture. All right, I'm ready. 1, 2, 3. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I would be remiss as a solution engineer if I didn't dive into solution engineering a little bit. So I know that you're both in management and not necessarily individual contributors anymore, but I would love if you could dive back into your numerous years as solution engineers and talk about what a typical day looks like for a solution engineer in the education industry. And it also include, what did you enjoy most about your role and what were some of those challenges?
I can kick that off, Dan. I think the beautiful thing about solution engineering, I'm going to say, is no day is the same. There is no typical day. But I would say a typical week might include discovery with our customers, right? I think that the main benefit of this role is that you do have that opportunity to be curious in service of problems that customers are trying to solve, or prospects, right, depending on where they are trying to solve, and being able to kind of dive into those. It may be fighting for the chance to do that discovery. I'm going to be real about it, right? So sometimes you do have to convince people, especially with a platform like Salesforce, and we just made that point around point solutions, where they show up and they say, show me what it does. Like, well, it does a lot, right? So let's narrow that down. Let's try to figure out what problem you're trying to solve, and kind of make it a little more personal. Kalyani, thank you for the heart. Sounds like folks have been in that place before. So it's some of that. It's what we call solution creation, right? Demo building, collaborating. So my team is aligned to accounts. But if we do find that someone's trying to solve a problem in a specific domain, like recruiting and admissions or student advising, success, advancement, collaborating with folks on Dan's team to say, what is this solution look like for this person? Kind of working collaboratively with the team, and to be the voice of the customer internally. So for an account SE, to be an expert in the customer. All the way through to how do they buy their products, right? How do they make technology decisions? So it might be researching, it might be conversations, and then we do a lot of scale programs, which means developing content that can be used in multiple situations, whether it's video recordings, demo assets, solution documents. Those are a few of the tasks you might find in a day. Dan, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, one that took me a long time to get any good at, was just managing, quote unquote, managing the sales folks that I was working with and their leadership. There's in my opinion, just a different level of pressure in that role, and being able to navigate that relationship and the requests that they are making of you, and really having more of a team effort. I kind of joke that if you haven't had an argument with a salesperson and you've been an SE for a while, you might be doing something wrong. There's definitely a lot of soft skills that go into that with the sales team and up to sales leadership. So if you want to be a happy SE, just getting comfortable having challenging conversations internally is something that I came to over time.
Yeah, it's a great call out, because when people think of customer facing roles, they're mostly thinking of those external relationships. How good are you in front of a customer? Can you present information? Can you connect with folks? And not enough attention is given to those internal relationships, which are as important, if not more important, right? Because how happy do you want to be in your role? If you want to be happy, then you have to be able to manage expectations with the folks that are essentially your extended bosses. And that's how I look at my AEs. Even though I don't technically work for them, what I'm doing day to day is in support of them. So they drive what I do. So I kind of do work for them. And if you don't manage those relationships well, life's not good. So definitely a skill to think about.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Dave, like a very common piece you'll see is folks that come in as new, right, and maybe have a lot of Salesforce experience, a lot of industry experience, but maybe not a solution engineering experience, and they want to help, right? So that's a combination an AE will love, and you'll end up doing work that maybe you shouldn't be. So kind of setting those guardrails early is always a great idea.
Yeah, learning how and when to say no is definitely a skill. Because you can do it in ways that disrupt the relationship or ways that reinforce the relationship. And so that's not something that can be taught. You just kind of have to experience it over time and then get better at it. So it's a great call out. We've got maybe 10 minutes left, and I wanted to ask a couple of questions in the remaining time about transitioning into the education space. So at a macro level, right, within your experience, what are the different career paths available? Say if someone is interested in the education industry as well as Salesforce and they want to bring those together.
I think that's a great question. So, in terms of just the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, right, and kind of how do people get to Salesforce from education, and how do people maybe get into Salesforce when they're in education? So, because we are an industry group, we have a lot of hires from industry, right? So people that have held a job on a university campus in a K-12 school district. A lot of this, might have been an accidental or an intentional admin, or someone who has, made a technology impact in the industry, and is then interested in kind of flipping that script, right, and becoming part of the wider technology ecosystem. And it isn't necessarily always directly Salesforce, right? Folks might look at the ecosystem, like the partners, right? We have a lot of consulting partners that have a specialized industry specific practice, right? So we also see folks come in to the ecosystem that way. I would say if you're looking to look at the education industry, maybe look at our customer stories, right? Talk to people that, everyone has some personal experience with education and how this technology could make it better. We have a Trailblazer group in specific to education, right? So seeing some of the challenges and ways that they're using Salesforce technology to solve that. I'll pause there because I know I just said a lot. I'll let Dan chime in too.
Yeah. I mean, the things that come to mind are just the institutions that I've worked with that have frankly had trouble staffing up the Salesforce skills that they needed. So there's definitely opportunity there, and a trend to be able to hire more remote folks as well. So if you have Salesforce skills and maybe a Salesforce admin or developer jobs on campus, and then like Keely said, definitely the partner ecosystem as well. This is definitely a growing space for Salesforce, where we have hundreds and hundreds of institutions using Salesforce. So the need is definitely there, and the Salesforce economy is a real thing, and it's real in our industry for sure.
Yeah, and Dan mentioned before about Education Cloud having some of the common components across industries, right? So if you have worked in health sciences or financial services, I know in talking to our partners even about the possibility of this industry cloud, they were excited because then they have a deeper bench of folks that they could bring onto an education project to get experience with that implementation. So I think it also, from a capabilities perspective, opens that bench as you learn more about industry cloud capabilities with Salesforce. They do translate across.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point, right? Because I don't think you have to necessarily work in education or have an educational background to have educational needs. So Education Cloud can be leveraged, to your point, in other industries, maybe as a partial solution to bridge gaps that those clouds don't currently have. And one example that comes to mind for me, and I know Dan and I have talked about this, is within my sector, public sector, the military specifically. They're always looking for training information. Like, show me all my training, all my credentials, and there are data models within Education Cloud that speak specifically to that. And it requires a little bit of massaging, but there's definitely cross-functional capabilities that we have borrowed for numerous demos. So even if maybe you don't have your heart set on it yet, or you're not sure about it, there's utility in being aware of and knowing how to leverage Education Cloud, because it's even though it's a perceived as a niche product, it has broad application. Awesome. All right. And for folks, like, obviously, you know, for folks that are interested in entering this space, right, there's the education cloud certification for consultants, right? I think nonprofit cloud probably has some commensurate capabilities. But I want to ask, I guess the final question would be, you know, as managers of solution engineering, when you're doing interviews, right, to bring new SEs onto the team, what are you primarily looking for from a hard skill, from a soft skill perspective?
I guess I can take that one. I mean, some of the obvious things: Salesforce skills, experience with Salesforce, experience in the industry. Maybe you've been a solution engineer or demonstrated presentation skills. Frankly, though, if you have all three of those things, you might work at Salesforce already. So certainly not something we're looking for all three. Many people have come into the SE org that we work in without Salesforce experience or a lot of it and have been very successful. So I count myself as one of those. So I that's, not mandatory, but for me, if I can find someone that has Salesforce, let me say this a different way. The SE part of the role is what I find to be most teachable and that can be learned as you get here, as opposed to maybe the industry and Salesforce experience.
Gotcha. What about you, Keely?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's, like you said, there's hard skills that are learnable. There's soft skills that are observable and practicable. I think having a Salesforce foundation of any sort is a great start. Like when people come to me, I've worked in the education technology for a long time. They say, "How do I get to Salesforce?" And like, if you don't have a Trailhead account, right? If you're not kind of working towards learning the base technology, I think that's that's an indication to me that you're putting your hands on it and having an intent. You don't have to show me a completely implemented institution, right? That's maybe you're better for professional services if you do that. But yeah, so I would agree that's kind of the three legs of the stool for me as well, with industry, Salesforce, and solution engineering, with solution engineering being the one that can be kind of guided down that path more easily.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, folks, we're going to close it up here for this episode. But before we do, I wanted to thank both Keely and Dan for spending the past hour with us, talking to us about the education industry as well as the education cloud, all its various applications. Thanks so much. And thank you to all of you for hanging out with us this Wednesday evening. Hope to see you back here in a couple of weeks for the value of being a Salesforce content creator with some of the more active content creators in our ecosystem, the names you'll recognize. So keep an eye out for that. Have a great week and stay safe. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure.